Hey, what's up, everyone? So today we're going to be talking about Metallica. Yeah.
I don't sound like that, do I? Yeah. I guess I do.
Okay, but seriously, we're going to be talking about Metallica today. But before we do that, I want to invite you down to the comment section. Give me a rating, 1 out of 10. How good do you think my James Hetfield impression is? I mean, maybe I'm a little too confident about it. Maybe I shouldn't have just embarrassed myself on YouTube, but hey, screw it. We're having fun. But anyway, today I'm going to be going through kind of my overall thoughts about Metallica's discography. I've always been familiar with a lot of their stuff, but just up until a couple months ago, I had never gone through every single one of Metallica's albums. So I decided to do that, and in this video, I'm kind of just going to share my thoughts and my rankings from my least favorite to my favorite Metallica album, and just kind of give you some thoughts on each one, and then an overall kind of recap of my thoughts on the band themselves. So stay tuned until the very end, and you can decide if you agree with my list or not. So it should come as no surprise that my least favorite Metallica album is Saint Anger. What's there to say about it that hasn't been said a million times on a whole bunch of different videos on YouTube? Obviously, you know, the snare sound is absolute trash. It sounds like a trash can is being beat on by Lars. The lyrics are god awful in so many different ways. It seems like on Saint Anger they were trying to get ahead of this like new trend where they thought like rock music was going, and they just completely whiffed on it. You know, I guess it was worth taking a shot at something different, but Saint Anger, definitely not a good album whatsoever. For a really great breakdown of it, check out Todd in the Shadows YouTube channel. It's one of my favorite channels on YouTube. On his Train Records series, he covers Saint Anger, and it's a good 20-25 minute video, breaking it down a lot farther than I am. So be sure to check that out. Saint Anger, the worst Metallica album by far.
My lifestyle determines my death style. My lifestyle determines my death style.
But Saint Anger isn't their only bad album, because also I'm going to include Lulu, which is kind of like a project that they did with Lou Reed of Velvet Underground fame. So this thing is just painfully long, it's painfully repetitive, and also just, you know, Lou Reed's voice is not great to begin with. I have never really liked the Velvet Underground stuff, except for like a few select songs, but when I listened to those, I definitely didn't get the appeal. I know they're like classic albums and stuff, or at least the Velvet Underground and Nico one is, but I've always thought they were hard to listen to just because of how bad the recordings are and stuff like that. Maybe that's just me being a little too picky. The music can be okay at times on Lulu, you know, like on the song Cheat on Me. You know, there's like a good mid-tempo riff that's kind of like going throughout it, but then Lou Reed's vocals just seem like they're recorded like in a completely different room. Not to mention, you know, they're not good, but it just also doesn't fit with the song, and that's just kind of how this whole album is. Like, it's just like, why? I know he's probably like their hero, or, you know, some kind of, it's not really inspiration, because it's not like, you know, Metallica sounds anything like what he did, but, you know, I guess working with a legend was probably why they did this, but overall, it's just, it sucks. I'm not gonna lie to you. So amongst Metallica's 12 albums, this next one, just breaking into the top 10, is Hardwired to Self-Destruct from 2016. So I just listened to this one last week, like 3 or 4 different times, and I honestly, like, to look at the track list now, I couldn't tell you how any of these songs go. They're forgettable. I guess, you know, in some way they of course rock, you know, they're being played by, you know, some metal legends, so it's not going to be like the worst thing in the world, but it's just so safe. It feels like it's just average. The song Halo on Fire kind of sounds like Avenged Sevenfold, which is definitely not a compliment. Kind of some of these late era Metallica songs and stuff like really do sound a lot like Avenged Sevenfold. I think James' voice kind of starts to drift towards that for some reason. Maybe not, that's not the sound that they were necessarily going for, but that's just what I get out of Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Just so much of this feels bloated and just kind of boring throughout. You know, it has a lot of long songs, so much of it. If it's going to be that long, then you better be like switching things up throughout. You shouldn't just be like, you know, 2 minutes into the song, and then you fast forward 5 more minutes, and it's just doing like the same crap. And you know, like in earlier albums, they make these longer songs and these longer albums more effectively, where they change things up. But I just feel like these songs just stay the same for so long, and it just gets tiring. Also, I kind of feel like the song Confusion sounds really similar to Cyanide from Death Magnetic, which would come before Hardwired to Self-Destruct. So I don't know if they were taking like maybe the song, you know, Cyanide, that was one of the more popular ones off that last album, and maybe unknowingly just recreating it. I just get so many of the same vibes from that song into this song as well. So the album I just kind of mentioned a little bit, Death Magnetic from 2008, is going to be our number 9 on the list. It's another one that's just way too long. It kind of suffers from that same type of thing I was talking about with Hardwired, where a lot of these songs are forgettable, except for a couple of them. Cyanide and The Day That Never Comes have some really cool parts in them. I remember as a middle schooler, when this came out, you know, this seemed like the coolest thing in the world. And whenever I was going through this discography, I was looking forward to getting to Death Magnetic, because I was thinking it was going to be this big epic thing that I would like come back to and like get to know some of these, you know, deep tracks on the album that I wouldn't have known before. But then I get to them and it's just like nothing special. So Death Magnetic kind of underwhelming. It was kind of advertised as like a return to form after Saint Anger being such a failure. And, you know, Saint Anger, obviously, I think it still sold a lot, but, you know, by all intents and purposes, everybody knows it sucks, and it kind of, you know, hurt their reputation a bit. So Death Magnetic was supposed to be this, like, we're getting back to basics thing, I think. And it's just like a little bit too basic, in my opinion. So their most recent album, 72 Seasons from 2023, is our number 8 album on the list. They kind of go back to this like more thrashier sound that they began their career with. So this was kind of actually more of a throwback to like, say, the Kill 'Em All days. Obviously not as good. It's produced way more slick. So I think it loses that magic of what makes like thrash metal great. And I don't claim to be some kind of like thrash metal expert or anything like that. We'll talk about Kill 'Em All here in a second, but like what it does good, 72 Seasons tries to do, but it's just got half the inspiration, I guess, half the youth, or twice the youth, twice the age, whatever you want to say about it. There are a couple really good tracks on 72 Seasons that I like, that I've kind of kept in my library on my phone. Shadows Follow and You Must Burn. You Must Burn might be like one of my favorite Metallica tracks post Reload. You know, like so many of these albums, we've talked about them all now. They just like don't really connect with me. They don't like stick with me. But this song kind of does, because you can, like, especially on Shadows Follow as well, you can kind of sing along to. And I think that's never like the worst thing in the world. I know metal purists, maybe melodies aren't like their number one thing on their priority list, but for me as a music listener, that's something I'm looking for. So number 7 on our list is Kill 'Em All from 1983, their debut album. Of course, I don't know what it was like to be around at that time, because that was 11 years before I was born. But, you know, from what I can tell, it really was like just this moment in time where this new band was just came out of nowhere and just like kicking ass. And here's this kick-ass new album with, you know, such a sweet track like Seek and Destroy. I love that song. Also, Jump in the Fire is amazing. Jump in the fire, yeah. Like, who doesn't love that, you know? You know, there's like a rawness in the production that they would, you know, just naturally lose later in their career once they became a little bit more, you know, bigger and had more resources and stuff like that. But, you know, the rawness, the raw sound, it can be good in one way because you feel like it's more authentic. It's like kind of homemade almost, sort of garage bandy. But, you know, the bad thing about it is that this album's kind of quiet compared to just about anything else. So, you know, sometimes a little bit of the punch gets lost in that. Even if you turn it up, it just maybe doesn't like thud and have the low end that it should. But Kill 'Em All, still a really, really good album. Kind of starting to get into the part of the list where everything from here on out is stuff that I really like. Number 6 on my list is Reload. This is like an album that kind of is near and dear to my heart for a certain reason, and that's because being like a 4 or 5 year old, I can remember riding around in my aunt's truck, and she had Reload on cassette, and she might have also had Load. I can't really quite remember, but I just remember listening to Fuel and Memory Remains, and thinking that was just like the cool shit back then, and it still is some cool shit, you know. The Fuel, yeah, like that's maybe one of my favorite like moments in rock history, you know, in a song, is just that part, and then the freaking riff after that. Memory Remains, also, you know, really unique with having Marianne Faithfull's voice in it. It kind of gives it this like haunting feel. And looking back, it's kind of crazy that, like, I think, you know, she just passed away a few weeks ago. I don't know how old she was when she passed, but hearing her and like seeing the music video from Memory Remains, she seems like she's like 98 years old then. So it's crazy that she lived another 25 or 30 years, a legendary musician in her own right. But I feel like on Reload, the first 4 tracks are like incredible, between, you know, like Fuel, Memory Remains, Devil's Dance, and Unforgiven 2. Just such a great stretch. But then I feel like after that, it doesn't necessarily drag, but it just never does anything special after that. I don't feel like. And this was kind of like in we're getting into that CD era where, you know, you could put like a whole bunch of songs on the disc, and artists were starting to really take advantage of that and putting every track they could cram on there. But unfortunately, this album kind of suffers from some stuff at the back end just not being as strong as the front.
Drift away, fade away, little tin goddess.
So And Justice for All is my 5th favorite Metallica album. I know this might be a little lower than what most people would have this one. I know some of you are probably saying it's like Criminal, but anyway, I think there's like a lot of epic moments, you know, with one, and then the title track. You know, they really do that well where, you know, they are longer songs, but they switch it out or switch it up throughout and make it interesting, which is what the later albums wouldn't do, like I mentioned earlier. So yeah, these kind of have these like storytelling songs. I feel like, you know, it's meant to be enjoyed as like an album, not necessarily like one song at a time, it seems like, which is a good thing. But then just some of these songs aren't really that strong to me. I don't know what it is, but it just hasn't really, some of these haven't clicked with me. And like on Blackened, I don't know, that one just like kind of puts me off for some reason to start the album. The snare sound on Saint Anger gets so much grief, but honestly, I feel like the snare sound in Blackened is also god awful. It just kind of seems like cheap and thin and just like way too choppy. It just like doesn't really feel like it belongs in the song. And there's a couple other times throughout the album where the snare kind of stands out in a bad way. So that's what really, there's a couple things are what brings Injustice for All down into the number 5 spot when it might be higher on many other lists.
My breath is Irish for dear. Oh, please, God.
Load from 1996 is our number 4 album. It kind of suffers from the same thing as Reload, where it's no pun intended, but the album is front loaded, and then almost seems like it kind of slips in the back half. In this case, I think like tracks 4, 5, 6 are like amazing. Until It Sleeps, King Nothing, and Hero for a Day are some tracks that I really love. I know Hero for a Day, it doesn't really rock, you know. It has rock elements, but it's kind of one of their more low-key, you know, type of songs that, you know, people kind of have mixed feelings about, it seems like. But I certainly love it. So, you know, I think this album was a lot less metal-y than kind of what fans were used to, even with the Black Album that gets a lot of talk about it being like too slick and and too mainstream. I think Load even kind of takes that a step further, and it starts to like really get to people like some of the purists of Metallica that had been around at the beginning. But the thing about people like me is that, you know, when these were coming out, I was just like being born. I was like a toddler, you know, so I kind of grew up in a world where these albums already existed. And, you know, with my previous example, how I talked about, you know, riding in my aunt's truck and having this stuff playing, these were like the type of Metallica albums that I was introduced to first. So, you know, it wasn't until later on that I would hear some of the earlier stuff, and then just a few weeks ago start this whole process, you know, beginning with listening to Kill 'Em All. So, you know, like this mid-90s stuff, it's not for every Metallica fan, but, you know, I do like Load and Reload quite a bit, with Load being number 4. So the 1986 classic album by Metallica, Master of Puppets, is my number 3. I know a lot of people probably have this at number 1. It's just one of those things. It gets kind of crowded once you get to this top 3 when it comes to like how I feel about Metallica albums. I think Master of Puppets is incredible. You know, there's so many memorable moments within it. You can kind of look at each song on the track list and know immediately what it is. And when you put it on, it just it gets you headbanging. You know, like what else is there to say? Welcome Home Sanitarium has some of my favorite drumming by Lars. Just freaking hits hard, and you know, just has like this unique kind of feel to it that drives the song forward, and I really dig it. I'm not the biggest fan of instrumentals, but like Orion is dope. It's one of those songs that once it like starts up, I can kind of like in my head know what's coming next. I've just heard it so many times, and I think this was even back, you know, when I was a kid. I learned this song for some reason, which I don't really even know why. Maybe it was like playing Rock Band Metallica. It might have stuck with me then. You know, it just has so much crunch and torque in the production of this album that really is the highlight for me. I know it'd be a lot of people's like Desert Island album to bring with them. It's crowded at the top. That's just where it sits, but I don't have too much bad to say about Master of Puppets for sure. So I have very similar kind of feelings about like Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, but Ride the Lightning takes over the number 2 spot for Master of Puppets, just because the first 4 songs are just absolutely epic, including For Whom the Bell Tolls is my favorite overall Metallica track. From the beginning, you know, with the first bell ringing all the way to the slow fade out, it's just a freaking wild ride. You know, who couldn't love the okay, I'll quit. But you know what I mean? It's freaking killer. You can't deny how great of a hard rock song that is. I feel like Fade to Black is another one of my favorites that's here on Ride the Lightning. Another one where like several times earlier on in their career, in these first 4 albums that have so much kind of like acclaim by the fan base, they have these long epic songs. You know, this is where they do it right, is on Ride the Lightning. You know, just maybe towards the last half of the album, I don't like as much as like the first 4 songs, but they're still good. Like it's overall an excellent album, and one that you know, I'd recommend anybody checking out if they haven't listened to already. So my favorite Metallica album is the Black Album. I think just whenever I think of Metallica, that's where my mind goes. I know a lot of people would think Master of Puppets probably, but just it seems like this is like it captures the essence of what I feel like Metallica is like. And that's coming from me, a guy that wasn't around at the beginning. But I think everything that they do right is front and center in this album. You know, not only the riffs, but I feel like they also mix in so many great melodies that, you know, you do have kind of more of a mainstream appeal, obviously. I mean, it was a ultra successful album with a lot of hits. You know, like Enter Sandman. Yes, is Enter Sandman a little bit tired? Maybe, but it's also, when you break it down, such a killer song. You know, as I was kind of like learning to play the bass guitar, that was one that's really good practice, because it's such a fun song to play on the bass, but it's also really somewhat challenging in like a fast way. You know, not like reinventing the wheel or anything like that, but you're gonna learn your like rock rhythm by this song and by listening to it. So. And, you know, like some of the elements that they would pass along to Load and Reload, kind of this direction of sound kind of being different in this the 90s era of Metallica. It's just that they do everything right in the Black Album, and later on in Load and Reload, they maybe the quality just slips a little bit, and it could be a hangover from how huge this album was. Like, how could you ever, you know, top it in terms of overall popularity, whether that's something they cared about or not, I don't know. But Sad But True, you know, another killer song. Wherever I May Roam, another great one. Don't Tread on Me, Don't Tread on Me. Like, I love that part. Through the Never, and you know, this album is just full of tracks that I can easily connect with, and like in my hard rock part of my body, you know, it just kind of gravitates towards this album. Even with Nothing Else Matters, that catches a lot of grief for, you know, being this like slower ballad, and you know, their fans weren't used to them doing this at that time, and they really haven't done it much since either. I mean, the Unforgiven songs have that as well, kind of like this slow ballad feel. It was just a moment in time, I guess. I don't know what it was like, but certainly. Obviously, in 1991, there were so many great albums being, you know, released at that time. There's that like meme of like all the cassettes stacked up. It's like all these albums were released in within like a few weeks or something, and you see Nevermind and 10 and the Black Album and Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and it was just a great time for rock music. I'm sure. I wish I was around during that. And, you know, the Black Album, I've got to imagine that it's one of those things, if you're a Metallica purist, you either love or hate. I would think even if you hated it at the beginning, that, you know, it kind of would have came around to you, and some of the tracks would have grown on you as, you know, your music tastes progressed, and as the music world and the rock world progressed. I mean, there's a lot of great indie rock right now and a lot of great hard rock. I mean, Idols, I love them, but in terms of what's being played on the radio, rock radio, if something like a Black Album came out today, it would absolutely blow everything else away in that field. It would seem like such a breath of fresh air. So back then, for it to maybe be a breath of stinky air for some people, I guess I can't relate. I don't get it, but you know, I think the Black Album is Metallica's greatest collection or greatest body of work overall. But overall, my thoughts on Metallica, my closing thoughts as I wrap up doing this discography, amongst, you know, the greatest metal bands of all time, for sure, if not number one. I think it'd be a hard case to make to put really anybody above them, between, you know, all the band members having kind of their own appeals. You know, James Hetfield with his voice and just his aura on stage, and of course Lars, his drumming ability, which he gets knocked for a little bit. I don't know if I get that, you know, but of course a couple different bass players that have always held down the low end really well, and then Kirk Hammett. So many great guitar solos within these albums. Maybe towards the end, you know, the last few albums we don't see that as much. It's more like just repetitive riffs, you know, that kind of get old after a while. You know, that's kind of the theme for me, is being too long and bloated for some of these newer albums. But in the mid to early part, I think it's like nothing but good stuff. This was the Metallica discography was a treat to go through. But I definitely appreciate you sticking around this long in the video. If you're a Metallica head, you know, I would definitely love to hear your thoughts in the comments on kind of what your rankings are, what you would change about my list, or things that I said that were maybe something you really agreed or disagreed with. I want to hear it all, just whatever your thoughts are on this video. I'd love to talk with you down there. Also, if you want to see more content like this, I have a lot of different videos I've been doing, some album reviews, some video essays, and then like a concert vlog thing. But I'd like to do more artist retrospective type of thing like this, where we talk about every album, whether I'm just now listening to them or whether they're one of my favorites and I've known them for a while. In this case, it's somewhere in the middle. I knew a lot of Metallica before this, but I also shored up a lot of knowledge about them, about some of their other songs that I hadn't heard before. So anyway, I definitely would appreciate if you subscribed here to Last Few Spins so you don't miss any of that. And also like this video if you enjoyed it. But until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching.